What's up, guys? Today we're going to be going over the Opaque Hourglass, the new heavy combat bow from the raid, and I just absolutely love this thing. I think it's going to be one of those weapons I just have on practically at all times if I'm not using an eager edge sword for movement. I just truly love this thing, and in this video we'll be breaking down why I do, looking at its perks, its functionality, and just kind of overall showing off the best rolls. So starting off, the main unique functionality of this weapon, or this bow I should say, is that you can pick up the arrows after shooting them. And that is when they're stuck on a target, on the ground, on a wall, wherever they are, you can go and retrieve them and get all of your arrows back and have true built-in infinite ammo with this weapon. And you can stand on these arrows, which is a pretty cool feature. I'm sure there will be some speed tech or some weird things involving that, but that is a cool feature also. But overall, just the fact that you can shoot these arrows wherever you want at a target, then go retrieve them, and you can retrieve multiple at once as long as you're like in the same area. It's just so cool and makes it really good for a lot of different things in the game. So now breaking down all of its perks and things like that. First, we gotta start with all the bolt options. There's gonna be 5, and they all have different functionality. So starting off, we have the spring auger bolts, where bolts release an impulse shortly after impact that deals a small amount of damage and has a high chance to cause flinch. And this one on Carl, it's for 1036. Then we have the explosive bolts, where bolts explode shortly after hitting the environment or a target, but deal less damage on impact. So this one's gonna be more like Levy Breath, where it's gonna kind of split the damage into the impact precision and then even more from the explosion, and that hits for a little bit more at 1040, but that's gonna really be boss dependent. Not great for precision bosses, probably good for non-precision bosses. Then we have the serrated bolts, where recovering a bolt from a living target deals damage, and this one will do a decent chunk more, but you have to go pick it up to get the second explosion, which does hit for quite a lot, taking the total to 1226. But as I mentioned, to reach that, you have to go pick it up, which you could do in a DPS phase. You can shoot off all 10 arrows, then go pick them up, and it does stack. For every arrow you retrieve, there is an explosion. So that could be pretty cool, but obviously I don't think that's going to be the way to go for most damage. But for general play, that could be a pretty good choice. Then we have the charged bolts, where bolts attached to a target deal damage over time. So this will be more like a true anarchy Wither Horde type of situation, where it adds a dot to the enemy, and this does not stack like most dot damage in the game. So if I shoot 2, 3, 4 arrows in a row, it's not going to increase the tick rate of the dot or anything like that. It's still just going to be hitting 18 at the same frequency, but it will make it last longer because it's based off the last arrow that impacted. But that does do more damage, but it doesn't stack. So overall, probably net lower than some of the other options. But finally, one of the best options just for pure outright damage is going to be the heavy bolt, hitting for 1128. And this doesn't have any tick, any explosion, anything like that. It's just straight up damage instantly. But the trade-off is that it's now affected by gravity, and as they get further and further away, you might not be hitting your shots. You have to start aiming high because they drop over time. And for me, when I was testing it in the firing range, I mean, it pretty much goes straight for a pretty good distance. It didn't seem that big of a deal to me. I think if you get a like Velocity Masterwork or throw on Impulse Amplifier, I think in most situations you won't even notice the drop of the arrow. I don't think it's that big a deal, and more likely will be the way to go for most things. I think most bosses, you're not be in the range where you have to worry about it, and with those perks I mentioned, definitely not. So that seems to be the way to go, but the damage over time one could be really good for like Starfire. So there are definitely different options here depending on what you're doing, and they are all pretty good in different situations. So no matter what role you get, I think you're gonna have at least one good option. Now moving on to the perks on this weapon, starting with the left column, we have a new perk, Sympathetic Arsenal, where this one now is reloading after final blow reloads the stowed weapons. So this is like the third version of like an arsenal type perk, and this one is probably the least useful. It's going to be more for general play if you get a final blow and reload with the bow. It will just reload your stowed weapons, pretty straightforward. Not going to be useful for DPS necessarily, so something I'll probably stay away from. But the 2 perks I would be using for DPS is, one, I think the best overall is going to be Impulse Amplifier, which will give it the increased projectile velocity and the increased reload speed, both just base 20 reload and a reload duration multiplier, which means the animation is shorter. So I think that's going to be the way to go for just DPS, and I think that'll pair really well with the Heavy Bolt as we mentioned. I think the other option you could use for DPS is going to be Field Prep. So Field Prep no longer gives reserves. Reserves are no longer a thing in this game. So now it gives increased ammo generation along with the faster reload while crouching. And for a heavy weapon, I would normally say, I mean, you're not going to be using this thing for accurate, right? So who cares if you can have increased ammo generation? But with this having true infinite ammo, that is the huge plus of this combat bow, is the fact that you can use this thing for accurate. And when I say accurate, I don't mean like red bars, I mean like the majors, mini bosses, champions, things like that. For example, in the raid, almost every encounter has like hydras, cyclopses, wyverns, things like that leading up to DPS, and with having to do like 2, maybe even 3 phases of damage where you really need to be maximizing your heavy ammo, and you really can't use, like, let's say a Thunderlord, you just have to keep all of your ammo for DPS. This bow, that is not the case at all. I can go use all 10 bows on the boss, go pick them up, use them all for clear on the high health targets, pick them up again. And so having the increased ammo generation on Field Prep actually kind of makes sense, right? To help with getting more special and things like that. And following that up, where the fact that you can use this thing for both clear and damage at the same time if you wanted, and the fact that this is like one of the true great clear heavy weapons outside of like LMGs, some of the other perks in the left column I think are actually worthwhile. So we have Firefly, which will obviously cause the explosion and add the reload speed. Then we have Rolling Storm, which is now in the left, something I've been wanting for a long time. And I'm glad that some weapons are starting to have this perk on the left, where you can get the bolt charges. And then finally we have Wellspring for the ability regen. All 3 of these perks are honestly going to be really good for just a general play role on this weapon. So overall, the left column is kind of stacked for this weapon. I think there's like 5 perks are pretty good. And looking at the right column, the things that we can pair with those perks. First off, we have Vorpal Weapon, which apparently is bugged currently. I don't have one of these with Vorpal on it, but from what I've heard, it's getting the damage increase of heavy weapons at 10%, which it should from Vorpal. Apparently, it's also getting the 20% from primaries, which it's not supposed to, and since it's getting both at the same time, they're multiplying and is resulting in a little over 30% total damage increase on this bow, which is obviously bugged. And if that is true, which I believe it is, I guess just use Vorpal right now. I mean, a free 30% for no activation is obviously really good, but that is bugged and probably will be fixed at some point. So the other damage perks you could use just for a damage phase that require like no kills or anything like that. First we have Fire and Line, which is going to be a 20% precision damage increase, which means the net increase is actually lower. Fire and Line's not been a great perk for a very long time, and I would still stay away from it on this bow. Something like Frenzy would be a lot better. It's going to be a 15% increase plus maxed out reload speed. But overall, the best damage perk for like true boss DPS is going to be Elemental Honing. With this being an elemental weapon, you can get up to 5 stacks. It's going to be 2.5, 10, 20, 30, then 35 with times 5. And this perk works really well on Prismatic, where you can spread your 3 different weapons and your 2 different abilities and your super to make sure you cover all 5 elements and get that full 35% increase. And if we look at the DPS of that with all 5 stacks of elemental honing and shooting 5 of the arrows, it's going to be not too bad, to be honest. Looking at damage on Carl, doing the DPS and damage at the same time, I love the fine range. The DPS of the 5 arrows is going to be 819, and the total damage is 7,500. And comparing that to the Levy Breath, the thing that makes the most sense, the only other heavy bow, This is going to do a little bit more DPS, but practically the exact same total damage, which is pretty interesting and kind of what I would expect, right? I think the Hourglass is going to be really good for total damage because it has true infinite, but it's not going to have the same amount of DPS as most other options in the game, which I think is fine in the way it should be balanced. If it was on par for DPS, it would just be borderline broken with like true infinite ammo and the fact that you can use the same for ad clear. So even though the DPS is a little bit lower, I think you can make a case that this is going to be a great option for a lot of content. True infinite ammo, no need to worry about having ammo every phase. The fact that you can use it for ad clear leading up to the boss fight on those high health targets, I mean, it's just a beast for journal play. And then if we move on from like the DPS perks in the right, we have some other perks that are going to be pretty good too. So the 2 damage ones that we have are going to be Master of Arms. Or getting killed with any weapon will grant this bow a 15% damage increase for 7 seconds. If you get 2 kills, it will go up to 25 for 4 seconds. And that could be pretty good, but there's going to be an even better perk that is very similar, and that's the new one, Binary Orbit, where elemental final blows of the opposite, like light versus dark. So since this thing is arc, any darkness final blow will give this weapon a 25% damage increase for 10 seconds. And so that's going to be not only matching Master of Arms times 2, it's going to be much longer, and it will only require 1 kill. Now it has to be the opposite damage type, which is fine, I think, for most prismatic builds, or in the top slot if you use Stasis or Strand. I think that's no problem at all. I think that's going to be the best damage perk for just journal play. Which leads me to just the best journal play rolls. And the number one I want is just going to be Firefly plus Binary Orbit. You have that 25% damage increase. And then with Firefly, you have really good AoE ad clear and increased reload speed, maxing out the reload speed on this weapon. And then for DPS, with Elemental Honing or Warple, right now since it's bugged, in the left I would just pair it with Impulse Amplifier. It's going to make it so it's easier to hit all of your bullets and give you both the reload speed and multiplier. And that's definitely the perk I would go for. I think you could make a case for Field Prep, but Impulse just the best overall. And the third rule I might keep if I get it is just something with Rolling Storm or Wellspring in the left. Both are going to be helpful for ability builds. In the right, I would probably pair Dragonfly if I want AoE ad clear, and Frenzy just for the reload speed and damage perk. So those are the 3 roles I want. 1 for DPS, the Impulse and Elemental Honing. Number 2, Firefly plus Binary, and maybe a third of Rolling Storm, Wellspring plus Frenzy or Dragonfly. So there are a lot of great roles on the scene. I just absolutely love it. I love its functionality. I love that it's true infinite ammo. I love that it does a decent amount of total damage per actual bolt. Makes it really good for chunking high health targets. Go pick up the arrow. Always have ammo for DPS. There's just so many positive things that can be said about this bow. Definitely go farm it and try it out. It's going to be the one thing that makes me actually want to play into the tier system of the raid and farm the higher tier loot. Anyways, I think that's going to be it for the video. Like usual, thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time.